All right, well, this is my talk. I'm basically my goal today is to convince all of you that you should have more people without computer science degrees at your company. First, a little bit about me. So I'm a full stack developer at 10-4 Consulting in Madison, Wisconsin, which we checked at lunch on a map. I am technically south of here, just a little bit. It's also 12 degrees colder, so that's fun. In Madison, not here. Here is like heat wave. I tweet a lot, so if you're on Twitter, that's where you can find me. And a fun fact, I once played the jug, as in like a ceramic jug, in a national jug band competition in Minneapolis. I learned how to play the jug literally backstage, like 5 minutes before the competition. It's a long story. So why am I qualified to talk about this? So a couple of things. I graduated from a boot camp myself, Omaha Code School, which is no more, rest in peace. I volunteer regularly. The YWCA in Madison runs a web development boot camp, and I volunteer there on a regular basis. The company where I work, at one point, 6 of our 12 employees came from boot camps, and I think we have only 2 people with computer science degrees. And then we also really focus at the company on bringing people with non-traditional backgrounds into tech. So we have an apprenticeship program and an internship program, and I believe all of the people who have gone through that program have all been people without computer science degrees. All right, so I've had a lot of jobs. Some of them are relevant to what I'm going to talk about today. Some of them are not. So why did I move to tech? I was working as a journalist at an NPR station, really liked the work that I was doing, found the work very fulfilling, but I ended up leaving. And there are a couple of different reasons. One, the pay is way better than working in journalism, especially nonprofit journalism. It's a lot more flexible. You know, I'm working remotely the next 2 days while I'm here and going to the conference. That's something I would not have been able to do at any of the other jobs that I've had. It's an in-demand industry, and that's really the big one, right? I went from having I had bachelor's of journalism. I was working in a very sort of humanities-focused job. There weren't any jobs. The pay was terrible. I wasn't saving anything for retirement, and it wasn't working for me long-term. So there aren't enough tech workers, right? We know this. We've seen all the statistics. I'm going to show a couple more. This shows that of the STEM fields, and I think this is US data, but of the STEM fields, computing is the only one where job openings are greater than the number of graduates getting a degree in that field. And it's drastically greater. There are 80,000 unfilled, or there will be a projected 80,000 unfilled tech jobs in the US by 2022. And in Canada, there's going to be a demand for 216,000 tech workers by 2021. So we need a lot of people, and we're not finding them. So this again is US data, but we can show that while other STEM fields had growth that was increasing, computing actually had negative growth for a while, and it started to come back up, but it's still at a much lower growth rate than these other STEM fields. So at a time when we have more and more need for people with tech skills, we are graduating fewer and fewer of them from US and Canadian universities. So we couldn't hire all computer science grads even if we wanted to. Quick question, who here has any influence on hiring where they work? Good, I was planning on that, so that's good that everyone raised their hand. So, this is where boot camps come in handy. Has anyone attended a boot camp? Who's here? Couple people, okay. Does anyone work with folks who went to coding boot camps? Okay, cool. Right, so boot camps, in contrast to computer science degrees, are on a steady growth path. So there's been 1,000% boot camp growth since 2012, and this is data for US and Canadian boot camps. Even just the last few years, it's still growing. It's not at the same pace as it was at the early. There was kind of this explosion. The growth has kind of settled down a little bit, but it's still continuing to grow. Oh, those numbers just switched. Apparently I decided 20,000 was better, so we're gonna go with that. And then for Canada specifically, 1 in 10 devs already have bootcamp experience, right? So people are already acknowledging that this is just kind of an inevitability. We can't always hire people that have computer science degrees. So again, just showing, like, this is from Indeed, the job site. We can see that there's, again, a lot more people who are listing bootcamp experience on their resumes. And you might be thinking, well, but, bootcamp, 3 months, 6 months of learning at a bootcamp is not the same as a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, and it's not. But 84% of employers who have boot campers working at their companies said that they are as prepared or more prepared than people with computer science degrees. So we're seeing that it's not really a them versus them kind of situation here. So who are boot camp grads, right? What does the average boot camp person look like? So they're about 30 years old. They've got about 6 years work experience, but none of it is in tech. And they have a Bachelor of Arts, which is really funny when I was looking at this because that was like literally me when I went to my boot camp, so I feel very average. However, there are a lot of ways where, so that obviously those statistics are different than what you would expect from a college grad, right? They're going to be older, they have more work experience. While only 18% of computer science graduates are women, roughly, 45% of bootcamp grads are women or gender non-binary folks. So that's a huge difference, right? That's more than twice as many. And like I said, a bootcamp is not the same as a computer science degree, right? It's just not. You cannot learn the same amount in 3 months, 6 months as you can in 4 years. They're not equivalent in terms of the knowledge that they imbue upon graduates. But I argue that people without a computer science degree still have a lot to offer, and they have different things to offer than your average computer science grad. And this is a really good point to say in the presentation that obviously we're going to be speaking in generalities, right? Individuals are different. You have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but across the board, these are kind of some of the big takeaways that I want to leave you all with about people who do not have computer science degrees. All right, so 5 key things that I've learned. Number 1, your perspective has value. So for this presentation, I reached out to folks working in tech as developers who attended boot camps and kind of said, what do you think your boot camp gave you that has enabled you to be successful in your career today? So first we have Alex. She's working in New York as a developer. She was a journalist like me before she entered tech. And she talks a lot about how who you are matters in terms of the work that you do. So we talk at my company about how we are not our code, right? Like we write our code and that's important, but like it's divorced from who we are as people. We shouldn't take code reviews personally, all that kind of thing. But that argument of like your product is not related to you only goes so far. We're going to talk about this a little bit later too, one of the other lessons. So our experience matters, right? So in journalism, looking at Alex's background, it really teaches you to identify problems and solutions, right? What are you going to write an article about? Who are you going to talk to for that? Access to different resources, so knowing which community groups are involved with what, which people are affected by which legislation or which event that's happening in the community, and understanding the needs of those distinct communities. And all of these are skills that are very relevant for tech and that I would argue are often lacking in a lot of what we're trying to do. Same thing with liberal arts, right? Our experience matters. So when you are studying the humanities or liberal arts, you're exposed to a lot of different cultures and viewpoints. Learn critical thinking skills, which are also really valuable for tech. Creative approaches to problem solving. So all of these are non-technical skills that are vital for being successful as someone working in the tech space. Number 2, everything is a draft. So this is actually a woman who works at my company. She studied Chinese. And I really love, she says, sometimes you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which I think is really important. So refactoring is a huge thing that happens both in liberal arts and in the service industry. So liberal arts, papers, right? It's kind of basically an entire career of writing a bunch of papers, getting feedback from your professor, maybe getting feedback from your peers. Service sector also has refactoring. I don't think we really would think of it as refactoring, but let's say that you are a server and you get a table of 7. And 2 people order the special, but you realize you're out, so you have to come back. They have to order something different, right? Someone finds out that the meal they ordered isn't vegan and they're vegan, so that has to be kind of rearranged. You have to work with the kitchen to make sure you can get their vegan meal. Someone's meat is overcooked, so you have to handle that, find them a different solution. The kid spills their soda all over their dad's plate, so now you have to handle that mess. And then the restaurant starts on fire. It's not a true story, at least not the fire part. But a lot of these happen all the time, right? So when you're working in service, it's not just, you can't just look at someone who comes into the restaurant or the bar and say, okay, I know what they're gonna order. I have this clear, scope written of what they're gonna need. I can handle everything. I can prepare for all of the inevitabilities. It's just not how it works. You're constantly refactoring not only what people need, but your expectations of what they need. And this is also true in tech, right? So I went through, I work for a consulting company, so we have a lot of different Git repos. And I went through and I said, okay, what is my lifetime change for this code repository, right? So as we can see, yes, I've added a lot in the green, but you also take away a lot. It's not just putting new stuff on. It's constant, like 17,000 lines added, but almost more than half taken away in that same time frame. And then this one's my favorite. I don't know who this was or what project this was, but that's not a typo. They deleted 179,000 lines of code from a project and only added 5,000. Another lesson, being able to delegate in order to meet your deadlines. So Andrew was actually one of my instructors at my boot camp, and he was a teacher before he moved into being a programmer. And he talks about how his teaching skills have been useful in tech, where there's often a lot of teaching, especially if you're working for a company that doesn't just have senior developers, but even if you do, people specialize in different areas. There's a lot of collaboration. And his experience as a teacher, he felt enabled him to do that kind of work at his tech company in a way that left everyone feeling cared for, which we heard one of the speakers earlier talk about how dignity is really important, right? This is not a concept that Andrew had to be taught because he had lived it in his previous work as an educator. So delegation, how does that happen? Again, using Andrew as an example of someone with a non-tech background, how did he learn about delegation as an educator? So dealing with administrators. Right? That's a big part of your, maybe you have a student teacher, so you have to figure out, okay, well, what is a student teacher gonna do so they can learn something versus how do I get my work done and I'm not just babysitting them. Unruly pupils, which some people in the room might have been when they were in school. And parents, which I'm sure is really fun to deal with as a teacher. Service sector, how does delegation happen in the service sector, right? So if you're working at a restaurant, again, you have a host, so they're gonna determine who's seated at your table, when are they seated, how many people are you gonna have to deal with? Maybe you have to get your drinks from the bartender if you work at a place that serves alcohol. The cook, how you have to convey to the cook that, okay, this has to be vegan, or leave the bread off of this one, or I need this to come out first. Maybe someone's coming to bus your table, they can't do it too soon, they can't wait too long because you can't get another person seated. So you're really organizing all of these different aspects of your job in order to be successful, in order for everyone else to be successful. So really learning how to work with people with different personalities, how to delegate tasks that you don't have time for or that you can't do, make sure that everything happens when it needs to and in the right order so that everyone can get their job done. So then in tech, how does delegation happen in tech, right? Well, it kind of depends on what your position is. So some of these aren't going to apply to everyone, obviously, but maybe you have a project manager. So there you have to coordinate with them. Okay, what am I working on today? What is priority? Do I have all of the information that I need to be effective? Maybe I'm waiting on designs from our designer. Maybe I'm looking at the design. I say, okay, well, we can't implement that. We don't have time, or this isn't consistent with the way we've done the rest of the project. If you're not, a technical person, then you're working with all of these people plus the coders themselves. QA might come in and have things to say and send things back, and so getting them to sign off before you're actually done. Working with the data architect. I mean, there are tons of puzzle pieces that have to come together for something to actually be capital D done, right? Even if we go with the working is better than perfect, which we do at 10 Forward, it takes a lot of people to get to just working. And so if you come in knowing how to do that kind of delegation and coordination, that gives you a really strong leg up. And there's not always a ton that especially junior developers can do by themselves, even with a college degree. There's a lot of catch-up, especially if it's their first professional job. And yet, if they have this pre-existing set of skills from working in service or from having a previous career, which a lot of bootcamp grads do, right? They had that 6 years of work experience before they went to their bootcamp. Then they're gonna know a lot of this already and be able to hit the ground running. Right, lesson number 4, feedback is a feature, not a bug. So I missed the code review one today because my flight landed at like 2 a.m. and I'm really bummed about that, but I did hear a little bit of recap of it over lunch, and I think there was some of this idea in there. So this is Jacob, he's in Minneapolis. He went to boot camp, and before that, he actually has a philosophy PhD, which you might not think that that's someone that would naturally go into tech, but he'll argue that he has a lot of skills that, again, made him a lot more effective. And one of those is communication skills. So a lot of his philosophy work involved group discussion, small group discussion, arguing why this person or that person's philosophy was wrong or right, or how they intersected or how they contrasted. And he talked to me about how having those skills, that ability to manage different people's viewpoints, made him really effective as a developer, but then also when he moved up to being a technical manager as a leader. Because he had the experience to know how to sort of balance all of these voices and also convince them of what he thought was the best course of action. So learning to navigate and be receptive to especially critical feedback is really important for programming, right? So I want to talk a little bit about feedback loops from, again, liberal arts and the service sector, and kind of how those mirror the feedback loops that we might have working in tech. So again, papers. If anyone can't tell, I got really sick of writing papers by the time I was done with my liberal arts degree. And then group discussion, kind of like we heard Jacob talking about. So then service sector, right, pretty much everyone, pretty much all the time. A lot of feedback, especially if you're a bartender. You're always making drinks wrong, or you're taking too long, or you're serving someone else before them. If you don't have thick skin and the ability to discern what feedback is relevant and which feedback you can kind of just let slide off, you're not going to make it very long in the service industry. And then in tech, right, we have code review, like we mentioned. Maybe you have to demo for a client or for your manager, so there's some negotiating and communicating that goes on there. QA, so it may be learning how to ask for what you want from QA ahead of time so that they're not wasting their time. And then if you're in QA, like knowing how to effectively communicate with your developers so that no one is feeling attacked or degraded, like making sure that the communication is positive and efficient. And then user response. So if you have a product, you're going to get a lot of feedback from your users. How do you work with that? How do you filter through that and use that, apply that in a way that improves the product? And so the last thing I want to talk about is empathy. So empathy is everything. We are not our users, right? Who's heard that before? Oh, only a couple people. Okay. I hear that all the time, so I just thought that was like a truism that like everyone knew. We are not our users. But we're not. Turns out we are not our users, right? This room is a little bit more like our users than a lot of tech audiences that I speak to, which is awesome. But tech is still predominantly white and male and straight and able-bodied, right? And that is not who our users are. And so this is a problem because, we've all heard the stories, right? So facial recognition software that couldn't see people of color, or vocal recognition software that literally couldn't hear women. I think is it Amazon that's building the facial recognition software, and they just did a study, and it disproportionately identified congressional members of Congress who were people of color with mugshots, right? So white people, it was like, oh yeah, that's this congressperson, and people of color, it was like, oh, they're a criminal. This is messed up, and this is all the time, and this is recent. This is happening now. This is still a major problem with tech. We are not our users. But bootcamp grads are already more likely to grasp this concept and understand it because they are not like the rest of tech. Again, broadly speaking, right? And so 43% women and non-binary folks, 38% people of color. That is way higher than you're going to see at a university for someone getting a 4-year degree. And again, that's 6 years of non-programming work experience. So especially if we're looking at service sector, you're constantly coming into contact with people who are not like you. And that really sets you up to not only be prepared for that in tech, but to notice when it's not there, right? So my company where I work, like I said, we have a lot of bootcamp grads. We are about 14 or 15 people. We're half women, including our tech team, and we are a quarter people of color, which is still, we've got a ways to go. But that's way better than the industry average, and a lot of that is because we hire from non-traditional outlets. We look for people that will bring more than just technical skills to the company. And I know a lot of us try to do that, but it takes a lot of work. But it has very concrete dividends. So for example, we were building a job matching site for people who have been incarcerated. And it's tailored specifically to that experience. So do you have curfew restrictions? Do you have geographic restrictions? Are you not allowed to leave the county? Can you work with minors? A lot of folks who've been incarcerated don't have traditional educational backgrounds, so how can we take maybe certifications that you've gotten within the system and show that off to show what your skills are, right? There's a lot of different components to that if you're at a company where no one has experienced incarceration or doesn't know people who've experienced incarceration, it's really hard to anticipate all of those needs. But one of our bootcamp grads had an uncle who was in prison. And so she was able to look at that product and say, look, I think we need to frame this differently, or we're missing this part here, even to the client. And that's really valuable. That makes the product better, that makes our client happier, that makes it more effective for users. I mean, there's only wins there. And we would not have gotten that experience and that sort of added value if we had just gone, well, again, generalizing. We likely would not have gotten that if we had just gone with straight 4-year computer science degrees. So I've convinced all of you that you should go and hire people without computer science degrees, but it's not that simple, right? There are differences. And so how can we ensure if we're hiring people with non-traditional tech backgrounds that they're going to be successful, that we are setting them up to integrate with the company and to be able to fully use their skills that they're bringing to the table? Mentorship is really important. So we start with an internship, which is basically how, do you even want to be in tech, right? Because 3 months is not necessarily a long time. Maybe you go through the program and you're like, actually, maybe I want to go be a vet, which happened to one of our interns. Good for her. So that's kind of, what is tech? How does it work? Do you want to be here? If you decide you do want to be here, great. Then we're going to throw you into our apprenticeship program. And depending on what bootcamp you went to, you can skip the apprenticeship program. So I just went straight into being a developer after my internship because I went to a more rigorous bootcamp. But the YWCA one, for example, a lot of the students have young children, or they have to work part-time, or they have ability issues. And so they don't come to 10 Forward ready to just start working. They just don't. But we expect that, and we're prepared for that. And we think that it's valuable to put the time and resources into training them up rather than, again, just going for people that can maybe start coding right away for those reasons that, I've elaborated on already. So mentorship is really important. We do an hour of mentoring every week with our interns. I think we have 2 different people who do mentoring, so they get a lot of mentoring. And sometimes it's code questions, we'll pair. Sometimes it's just, hey, I don't know how to handle, I'm not meeting my deadline, so how do you do that? There's a lot of different things that you can talk about. Structure is really important, especially if it's the first time that they've had a full-time, 9-to-5 job. And then hiring in pairs, especially if you're hiring people of color, and maybe they're the first person of color at your company, or the first woman at your company, or the first Muslim at your company. You don't have to hire 2 women at the same time. But if you hire maybe a woman and a person with autism, they are not the only ones who are not a white dude. And that makes a big difference in terms of comfort level, in terms of feeling like they have someone to talk to who understands, again, on a broad level, what they're going through. Also, not having a computer science degree can be very daunting if everyone else at the company has one, right? It's easy to feel like everyone knows more than you because they do, and that you're not pulling your weight. And so hiring in pairs is a great way to sort of build kind of an inherent community for those folks so that they feel like they're supported and have someone to talk to. Setting clear expectations is also vital. And this was something that we weren't very good at 10 Forward until recently. Part of it was that we kind of hovered around 5 or 6 people for a few years, and at 5 or 6 people, the expectations are kind of obvious, right? It's small enough that you can just kind of talk to people, and you don't need policies, really. But as we started growing, we had a lot of growing pains in terms of letting people know what we needed from them, what we could give to them, and how we could kind of really come together and collaborate in a way that benefited everyone. And so I have a URL up here. If anyone's interested, we came up with this multi-page PDF that has all of our ranks listed. We have like 6 categories that matter to us, what we expect at each one of those, so at junior, at staff, at senior, what are the expectations, what are the privileges, how can you level up, and that's been really helpful for being able to, especially as at a company that really tries to like grow our people through the ranks. So if you don't have a document like that, I definitely recommend making one and making it available. And then patience. If it were easy to hire people who had different backgrounds than we do, then we would be doing it, right? We wouldn't have the numbers in tech that we do in terms of race and gender and all of that. It's not easy. And you know, the story earlier about the bacon joke, and well, why would anyone care? It's just a joke, it's harmless. And maybe it is to most of the people, but it's not to that woman who, contacted him afterwards about it. And so being patient with your non-computer science degree hires in terms of knowing that it might take a while to onboard them technically, but I would argue that's balanced by the other skills that they're bringing. And also patient with the rest of your staff, right? It takes a while to break a mold. And if your mold is that you require a computer science degree and you hire someone who doesn't have one, I think inevitably there's going to be some growing pains. And so expecting that and being patient with not just the new hire and the current staff, but also yourself as a manager, knowing it'll take some time to get everyone where they need to be. And part of this is really fostering an environment where questions and communication are encouraged, right? So if the bacon company had a culture where you just kept silent, that developer, who is now one of their more efficient employees, probably would have just left. If she felt like she didn't have an outlet to voice her concerns, she probably would have left. And so making sure that you have space for people to say what they need, that also opens up the door for them to say what they can offer. And because it bears frequent repeating, empathy is everything. So understanding that the challenges you might face getting to work or doing your job are not the same challenges that someone with a different background than you might face. So help the folks you work with or hire, because it sounds like a lot of people do some hiring here, help them to help you, because they really will bring a lot to your company. But it's going to take some effort on everyone's part to really embrace the full value of what they can bring. So these are my citations. Thanks. And my slides are up there. If anyone is interested, you can check them out. I would love to hear any questions anyone has about anything. I also will stand here until I get a question, so just giving you a heads up. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a ratio between maybe senior people and junior people in terms of, like, as you're hiring stuff, you need someone to train them up. So do you rely on the previous people you've trained up to do that training, or
Yeah.
do you feel like you need to inject new ideas that maybe wouldn't come from someone who's just like brand new?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. The question was, do you feel like there are ratio requirements between like juniors and seniors, right? As we're hiring all of these juniors, how are we training them? Part of it is, again, to pull from the talk earlier today, part of it is like, I was trained by the senior when I started like 3.5 years ago, and now I am training the other developers who are coming up. So there is we definitely are like a teaching company, so there's a lot of training, and then, like now I'm training Ray or whatever. We do have too many juniors. Like, full disclosure, we kind of realized we got into a point where it was like, we loved everyone we had, and everyone was an integral part of the company, but we needed another senior. We just didn't have enough. We had like 3 staff and like 5 juniors and really 1 senior, because our other senior ran the company and was doing less and less coding as he did sort of the business phony, as he puts it. And so we actually are looking to hire some more seniors, because I do think there has to be a balance there. And we kind of went a little too far the other way because we just kept finding good people we liked. So, yeah.
For the Canadians in the audience, what do you qualify as a staff engineer? Because it sounds like you're going junior, staff, senior.
Yes. That's an excellent question. And that's a large part of why we made that document, because we had just juniors and seniors, which I think are the kind of universal, or at least in North America, sort of the standard levels. We're really big into Star Trek. 10 Forward is actually the name of the bar on the Enterprise. And so there's so many Star Trek jokes. If you're into Star Trek, find me, I can tell you about them. But our rankings are actually ensign, lieutenant, commander, and captain. But it roughly correlates to junior, staff, senior, and then principal. And so staff, I'm trying to remember from this sheet. Junior is, one stack, and you are okay at it, basically. Like, you need help, but you're a self-starter, you can get things done. Staff is, 2 stacks well, and then there's, it kind of goes up a level for each of the 6, value points of the company. Senior is, 3 or more, and then principal is you have a share in the company and you own part of the company and you're more in a managerial role. Although our seniors are we don't really have tech leads. We're more destructured than that, but our seniors end up sort of being de facto tech leads for projects. So yeah, if that helps at all. And the link to that document is in my presentation too.
Hi. If you don't have an abundance of boot camps in your area, are there any other non-traditional sources that achieve the same effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. Community colleges I would argue, are still the population that goes to community colleges tend to be non-traditional. If there's not a community college, there are a lot of online boot camps. So I would caution against assuming there aren't any people interested in boot camps in your area just because you don't have a physical one located near you. There are folks that hire remote juniors. We don't do that because we think, especially coming from a boot camp, you really need to be in the environment and working with people and pairing one-on-one to really level up. Even self-taught, and that's a big thing. It can be as much as removing any kind of college degree requirement from your job listings. We specifically say on our careers page, we don't care if you have a degree, we don't care if you went to boot camp, we don't care if you're self-taught, we don't even care if you hate code and you still want to write it for the rest of your life. Cool, come work for us. So just really being really explicit about that, I think, makes a big difference in terms of attracting people who maybe don't have that kind of background. Another great way is hosting any meetups that are in your town, right? So just saying, hey, we'll give you coffee, water, and popcorn, right? It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but we have space, come use our space. P.S. We're really interested in hiring people who maybe don't have the same background as everyone else. So just kind of really trying to put it out there and be public about it, can go a long way. If there are any programs at nonprofits that teach those skills, so Madison's kind of an odd duck. We actually have some of the highest number of nonprofits per capita in the country. So there's lots of opportunities to volunteer with different programs that teach coding, to kids or to adults looking for a second career. So that's a great way to find people too. If there's any kind of Urban League or even Big Brothers Big Sisters, there's a lot of national. And I will say I don't know how many of these are in Canada as well. I'm not sure where you're from, but I'm sure Canada has similar national nonprofits that do career education and things like that. So if there are any of those in your area that you can kind of start volunteering with and meet folks that way, that's also a good option.
Not so much of a question. Your slides are marked private on LinkedIn.
I just changed. You saw me. I changed it to public.
You did change them.
Literally right before that. No, I believe you. But I anticipated this and I literally changed them. Okay. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, it says unlocked. Privacy settings. Public.
Allow users.
Maybe I have to say anyone with the link.
I might not be logged into LinkedIn.
I don't think you have to be though. I checked it in an incognito window. Okay. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Thank you for letting me know, though. I will try to take care of that. Software, am I right?
Do you have any advice for bootcamp grads or companies that hire them to help them onboard
Yes.
in a way that's efficient?
Yeah. So my whole last section kind of talked about that a little bit. I kind of breezed through that because I didn't know where I was going with time. But having clear expectations, having a mentor, hiring in pairs is really good. The structure is really important. So especially if you have folks who maybe have been underemployed for a while or haven't had sort of a full-time job in an office, that can be a big adjustment. And so making it clear, like, this is exactly what we expect from you. This is what you expect from us. If you're not getting it, here are the channels where you can let people know that your needs aren't being met. And I think really evaluating where they are at the beginning is helpful. So we have a series, for our apprenticeship program, we have a series of like FISBAs kinds of things that get progressively more difficult. Our primary stack is Ruby, so they're all in Ruby. And so if someone's interested in the apprenticeship program, we do the technical interview. We'll maybe give them some of the apprenticeship challenges to sort of gauge, okay, well, where are you individually? Because everyone's going to be different when you're coming from that background. And so then we figure out, okay, here's where you are. Here's what we need you to get before you can be what we would consider an actual, like, full-fledged junior developer. So let's, plan out a trajectory that will level you up to get to that point within 3 to 6 months.
Just before we take the next question, we have somebody in the audience here who has figured it out. You have to be logged in to LinkedIn.
You do?
In order for LinkedIn to be all like, hey, they're allowed to see this.
Weird. Okay. Did not know that. Good to know.
It was answered. Any others? Cool. Let me just keep spinning.